Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Allison Bainbridge, and I'm here to host this wonderful event, Book Passage event today, conversation between New York Times best-selling author Paula McLain, who's written many novels, including The Paris Wife, which was not only a bestseller, but it also helped propel a wave of popular historical fiction aimed at a female readership. History books, whether fiction or nonfiction, are traditionally regarded as a male preserve, and I think A Paris Wife started this trend towards female historical novels. We have a display in our bookstore that we always have with historical fiction because it's such a popular genre. And I have to say, most of our novels on there are written by female writers, authors. So Paula has written a memoir, 2 collections of poetry. Her writing has appeared in many distinguished publications, including the New York Times, Huffington Post. And Paula will be discussing her book, When the Stars Go Dark, with it's in honor of the fact that it's launching the paperback today. So we're celebrating that. She is going to be discussing this with Regina Brett, another New York Times bestselling author of God Never Blinks. Regina is a 2-time Pulitzer finalist for column writing, and she offers weekly inspiration on her website, weaving together actual cases of missing persons, trauma theory, and a hint of the metaphysical. When the Stars Go Dark is a propulsive and deeply affecting novel that tells a story of fate, necessary redemption, and what it takes when the worst happens to reclaim our lives, and our faith in one another as well. This novel is a suspense story, and the grim history it draws upon is Paula's own, interwoven with the real-life kidnapping cases of several young girls in Northern California in the 1990s. Many of us who live in the Bay Area probably can't forget these cases. They are intertwined with the fictional character in Paula's story. She references, among others, the kidnapping cases of J.C. Dugard and Polly Klaas. So please give a warm virtual welcome to Paula and Regina.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us. What a great event, and congratulations, Paula, on the launch of the paperback. How exciting for you.
Thank you, and thanks for agreeing to do this with me, Regina. So Regina and I, for those of you, obviously this is being hosted by Book Passage in Corte Madera. So Regina and I live not too far away from each other in Cleveland, Ohio. And Regina has a great dog, and I have a great dog, and occasionally we see each other in a walk around Shaker Lakes. And one day recently I was on a walk thinking about who I should invite to do this book launch with me, and Regina's name came to mind. So thank you for being so game to do this. And you have these wonderful stars in the background. Thanks for that, and for just for being terrific. And
well, I'm just so excited for you, being an author, when you get that book of that box of books and you open it, and it's like giving birth and you get to see the baby for the first time. Like they took it away and there you are. What was it like to open up the paperback and see that?
Yeah, so it's like a slightly different cover, which I don't know if you can see in the background here. I don't know which side it's on.
Left.
Yeah. That's the moment to me. And when I talk to young writers who are doing this for the first time, I say there are so many things about the publishing industry that you can't control. This is the piece you can control. Like, this is this thing that you've created. And when the box arrives, hug it, right? Make a moment, hug it and thank it and send a prayer back out to the universe, because there is this piece of you inside of this book.
That is true. That's why it is like giving birth, because you are in every page of that book. And can you, without giving too much away, can you kind of sum up what the plot is without giving away the ending at all? Just give us enough to taste it.
No spoilers at all. So it is a slow burn suspense novel about a missing persons detective in 1990s. And in her personal life, this woman undergoes a unspeakable tragedy. And when she tries to recover and escape, the first thing that comes to mind is to go home. And for her, even though she's grown up in foster care, it is Mendocino, California, where she spent most of her childhood in foster care. And so when she goes home to try to heal and get her feet back under her again, almost the first thing that happens is that she realizes that a missing girl has, a local girl has been abducted, sort of almost, without a trace. And she becomes obsessed with this person. And that's kind of the back and forth of the novel, is this detective and this young woman who's gone missing. And this isn't sort of groundbreaking territory, but what I was really interested in, Regina, is this idea of more kind of trauma-based. Why is it that we're drawn into the stories that we're drawn into? So Anna Hart is this missing persons detective, and yet why she's awake to the stories of the victims that she investigates is because of her own personal story. And it was like really kind of that piece that I was the most intrigued by, like how these lives intertwine in a kind of a deep and intimate way.
So, Paul, I wonder how much of your own trauma you had to tap into. You were abandoned by your parents. You grew up in the foster care system in California with your two sisters, in and out of foster homes. Did you make a conscious decision to say, I'm going to go into that well of my own trauma and like put it out there? Or does it just kind of happen gradually as you write?
I'd like to say that I decided right away that I was going to be that brave. I'm not sure anyone ever decides right away to be that brave. It happened gradually. It was probably the third or fourth draft that I realized, like, every time I reach for a detail in Anna Hart's backstory, that I just happened to supply something that was very close to my own story. And it's still quite close. It's not exactly the same. And that's just what I was attuned to, I think. And we never know exactly what we're up to in a novel. That's what I honestly think. It's this mysterious, almost magical accumulation of story and detail that accrues to reveal us in sometimes ways that we're not entirely aware that we're being revealed. And that's the way it was with me in this book. And that's why it's the most personal book that I've ever written. We don't sign on for that right away. Nobody does that, but I don't think anybody does that. Like, oh, I'm going to be brave, like out of the gate, 100% brave out of the gate. I think that it sneaks up on us. And this book did that for me. I just had this notion of a story, and the more I dug into it, the more personal it became.
So did writing this book, was it more difficult to kind of go back into that, or does it heal you as you're going through the writing? Like, is it a little bit of both? Is it kind of traumatizing to even?
I think it's both. I think it's absolutely both. It's difficult to go back to those moments because, post-traumatic stress and just all of the, the experiences that I had as a kid, which are kind of matriculated into this novel, I've definitely dealt with in therapy and just in the course of a lifetime. But in terms of putting them into a novel, they have to go through a certain distillation process, right? It's never just life as it happens. It kind of filters down through all kinds of things, and all your thinking and all your reading and all the things that you're feeling, and it's all the things that your characters are feeling. And so there's the interpersonal piece, and then there's the piece where it meets your characters' lives. And I'm super fascinated by all of that. I don't know why we're drawn to tell the stories that we're drawn to tell. But I'm on board as a novelist to be open to whatever draws me.
There's a quote in your book, When the Stars Go Dark, that says, it's not what you carry, but how you learn to carry it. You need to heal yourself, your child self too, and to make room for her, find a way to let her in. And that idea of healing that child that is in you, that you carry around your whole life, do you feel like that child in you got healed, and how much was writing a part of that healing?
Oh, wow. Okay. So I feel like you're like in a Barbara Walters moment, right?
Well, it's such a powerful book. And then when you know your backstory, it's like you really put you into this deeply.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm intrigued by this question because I'm often asked whether or not writing about my past is cathartic, right? Meaning, does it heal something by writing about it? And I say that mostly I write from the subconscious, right? I write without really knowing exactly 100% what it is that I'm doing. And then when I do get wise to myself, immediately I start thinking, how is it that this can be a larger story? Meaning, how can it be more beyond my life? And how can it help other people and not just me? And that is a significant piece, I think, in terms of healing any trauma, which is the act of service, right? If any single person, that's what fiction does, doesn't it? If we can tell our experience and one person can read it and think that they are less alone, like, isn't that a significant moment of communication, right?
It is.
One life touching one other life.
And you mentioned in your book, you have a quote, what is all the suffering for, if not so we can see how alike we are and not alone? Mm-hmm. Where will the mercy come from if not from us? And I look at it kind of like we each have a lottery ticket of whatever horrible thing happened to us it becomes our gift in the world to help somebody else who's going to go through that same thing, and we get to be the one to show them mercy or to show them the way. And I feel like that's what you've done, is you've taken your life experience and make it kind of the blessing for those other people that have been there.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I'm just going to say, for like the personal record, that you and I met when you invited me to come talk to your book club.
Right.
Right? And I'm just going to tell one story, and you can correct me. And please feel free to correct me. So in Cleveland, years ago, there were a group of young women who were found having been abducted for many, many years inside of a house. Perhaps many of you have heard of this. And when I was at Regina's book club, there was a woman who spoke that night, and we all kind of talked, even though it was essentially an event to talk about my book. And she talked about how she was someone who was called to come talk to one of the young women who was freed from this house that she had been held captive in for many, many years because she didn't have any family members. And here I was thinking, oh my God, like this is exactly what I'm thinking is significant about just everything about the human experience, right? Like how we bear witness to each other's suffering. Like, how do you just sit by someone's bedside and speak nothing because you can't understand their experience? Like all of that, I was just like rocked to the core by that. Like, how do you become that person who sits by someone's bedside, right? Oh.
You know, and what's powerful about that night, and I wish everybody could have experienced it, this woman, Devon Pointer, her daughter was abducted on the way to school when she was 14, raped and murdered. And for 29 years, she had no idea who did it because the DNA wasn't tested. and they didn't have all of the testing. And Yvonne was here that night, and I think your book cracked open something in her that she could share what that was like to have that unknown. And she sat in the living room and sang this beautiful song that was kind of the prayer she was given. And I've never experienced anything like that in the world. In your book, it like set a table for that to happen. And I hope it does moments like that for everybody around the country and the world that reads it, that it cracks something open for them. Because that's what it did for her.
It was unlike any book club I've ever been at. Like she sang and everybody bore witness to the story that she was telling, which was opened up by the story that I was telling, etc., all the way down.
You know, and you set your book in 1993 before DNA testing, before cell phones, before the internet. And I wonder for you why that was important. And after hearing Yvonne talk about not having those things and how hard that was, I wondered why that mattered to you to kind of put your book before all those, you know, the technology kind of helps people.
Well, to be honest, the first couple of drafts that I did of the book, I thought I was going to set it in the current day. I thought after 12 years of writing historical novels about people who actually lived, I was going to write a contemporary novel, like a spot-on contemporary novel. Which just goes to show how hilarious we are about the ideas that we have about our own work. But then one day I just got really frustrated with just everything you know how it is, Regina, I don't know if you watch like crime TV, but everybody thinks they can, you know, solve a murder with their laptop. And just like everything was just so easy and everybody knows everything. And I thought, I just want characters in a room talking to each other. I just want like an old fashioned story. And so I made a split decision to like trash everything that I'd done and go back and set the novel in, 2003? No, sorry, 1993.
1993, yeah.
Oh my God, I'm having one of those moments. Happens. 1993, which was the year that my oldest son was born. And I wanted it to be like pre-cell phone, pre-DNA, like all of that stuff to simplify the groundwork so that I could just tell a story kind of like at its root. And the minute that I made that decision, literally, like before I even told anybody that I was doing that, I was doing research one day. And, you know, I was like doing research as a way to kind of like bolster my character's voice. I wanted her to have like ultimate veracity and to be completely believable as this expert missing persons detective. And so I was listening to interviews with FBI agents, and this one former FBI agent was interviewing another former FBI agent. And it was so fluky, honestly, Regina, I don't know how to tell you about it. It just so happened that it was like the lead agent of the Paulas murder who happened to be interviewed. And I was listening and all the hairs on the back of my neck rose up. And I thought, that's right. And as he was talking, I realized it was like 1993, October 1st, 1993, when Paula was abducted from her home in Catalina. And that was like 60, miles as the crow flies from where my imaginary girl went missing in the same 10 days difference from where I had my material drafted. And I can't exactly explain to you why that mattered to me, because one is fiction and one is real life. And yet it really had this power. I just thought these two young women are contemporaries. And the family of Polly and other young people who have actually disappeared and been abducted, like they don't get to tell a story. They don't get to close a page, right? They live that experience, and there must be something that I can do to honor that experience in my writing. And so
You know, and as you're talking, the women that were missing in Cleveland, I was Amanda Berry, Gina DeJesus, and Michelle Knight. And I had interviewed Amanda Berry's mom many times while she was missing. And so when you think of what a family goes through, I mean, every single moment of their waking life is where is my child? So I'm really glad that you wrote this book to kind of take us into that world that so few people ever go into, but maybe we can have more compassion for those families, maybe do a little more to help solve those cases. I mean, they're rare, but they still go on in the world. So I'm glad you did that. But I wondered, was it overwhelming though, especially getting the facts of Polly's case and talking to a detective? Did you ever feel like, oh my gosh, this is just too much for me to emotionally bear?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, because I have my own triggers, right?
Right.
Childhood, and there were times that I had terrible nightmares, and I thought that it was more story than I was prepared to tackle. And yet I felt that it was significant at the same time. There are moments when we feel like fiction does more than tell a story, right? And that this endeavor of fiction reaches beyond, I don't know, the average, everyday subject matter.
You know, Paul, you mentioned triggers, and I wonder, you know, we all watched the Will Smith altercation this past week, and there's a lot of talk that he was traumatized with domestic violence as a child, and that it was a trigger for him. And I wonder, we all have those triggers, and you might have a lot having looked at your past and foster care and all that. How do you deal with when something does get triggered? When, and especially researching a book like this, I imagine like your buttons are getting pressed right and left. So how do you take the book you're writing and stay healthy, mentally healthy as you're writing it when your own triggers are getting pressed?
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure.
Well, you're still here, so you did some of that right.
I am here. Yes, I'm not always sure that I'm 100% mentally healthy, but I can understand how a moment like that would happen. And in fact, it's in the book, right? How moments can come and hijack us. And it's not our rational minds that get hijacked, it's our primitive kind of reptilian brains that get hijacked by this moment of the trigger. And it would be great if we were always 100% in our right minds, in our adult minds, right? Our highest selves. And yet we're not always 100% in our highest selves, right? Right? Nor can we be. And part of what I'm interested in this book is trauma theory, which is how moments of violence and early childhood experience that is difficult can kind of create an imprint that can speak through the rest of our lives. So I can't speak to Will Smith's experience or anybody else's experience for that matter, but I know for sure that sometimes those early childhood experiences can manifest, can amplify through the rest of our adult lives to throw us into certain situations that we're not exactly sure we mean to be in, right? And that is our subconscious speaking. That is our subconscious acting out a story that we're not even sure exists. And that's what's so interesting about the subconscious, right? That's what's so interesting about how, I think humans are fascinating. We don't always know what we're up to.
I like that line. That's beautiful. Well, I got to tell you, I trusted you as a writer because knowing your background, and I grew up with some childhood trauma, and it's hard sometimes to read books like that or to watch movies like that. But I knew you would take care of me as a reader because you wouldn't make anybody feel worse by sharing something that would take them into a deeper, darker place. So thank you for being able to write about those hard things, but also not let us go too deep into that hole and stay there, so to speak.
Yeah.
That takes a certain talent.
Thank you. Thank you. It was my intention to have this book ultimately have a message that was hopeful. And because I believe more than anything in the power of resilience and human resourcefulness and in the triumph of the spirit, like that's what I really believe. Right? But that doesn't mean that sometimes dark things don't happen to us before we rise.
That's beautiful. Let's talk a little bit about where you set this book. Mendocino is like a character. I love when writers take a city or a state or geographic area and it becomes almost like a character in the book. The fog, the redwood forest. What is your kind of personal relationship with this part of California? Do you have one?
I do. I must always.
You sound like a lover. You're ready to talk about your.
I know, I kind of do. Talk about my locations in books because it's almost always intimate, right? It's never happenstance. I had a reader one time stand up during a Q&A at an event and ask me not, what are you writing next, but where are you taking us next? And when I heard that question, I thought that actually is a great question because place really does matter to me in terms of my creative process. Like the world that I'm building is imperative to me. Like I have to be able to be swept away, or for me to be able to create that or recreate that for a reader so that they are swept away, right? And so Mendocino is a place where my sister had a job in my 20s. And this is not long after I aged out of the foster care system, and she did well. And I remember visiting her in Northern California and going on hikes as I visited over several days. And pretty much every location that's mentioned in the book, I've been at like foot by foot, and that matters to me, right? And when I had this idea, this missing person detective who becomes obsessed with this girl. Right away, I thought, it can't just be any place. I thought it has to be this place. And there's something about the atmosphere of Mendocino. If you've never been there, it's this Victorian village, kind of like 3 hours north of San Francisco, which is a great city, but it's 100 million miles away because it looks like New England. And it was actually the setting for Murder, She Wrote, if you've ever watched that show. It's this pristine Victorian village, like on a bluff above the Pacific, and the ocean kind of wants to eat you, and then the fog comes in this really eerie, almost otherworldly way. And I thought I wanted it to have this realm of, like a perforation, like this ability of the natural world to be punctured by the events that were happening, and all of it to be joined somehow. I can't exactly explain it. I can't exactly explain why certain places matter to me in my own kind of creative mind, but this was perfect. Like Mendocino was perfect. And then there was the Mendocino that I knew when I was 20 something. And there was the Mendocino that I knew when I came back to research this book. Knowing I was going to write this book where I stepped into certain spaces where I was like, oh my God, like this is where they could look for a body. And like that was Grumholt's Grove. Like this road, this is a creepy road. This is where Anna's cabin is. And in fact, I stayed in a cabin like way out in the dark where like the redwoods are just standing like sentinels and the sun can't quite get through. And it's almost like the light is as weak as tea, strangely. And I thought, this is where she is. Like, and when I was doing scenes at the end of the novel, it's only because I was in that space that I was able to kind of conjure those scenes, right?
So Cheryl wrote a question there. She said, I love When the Stars Go Dark and all of Paula's books, especially that Northern California is so accurately depicted. And readers want to know, how did you research that location? So you actually went there and really immersed yourself in it, it sounds like.
Yeah, I was there in my 20s, and then I went back twice to kind of research the novel in the present day because I didn't quite trust my recollection. Although I wrote The Paris Wife, like never having gone to Paris, and I wrote Circling the Sun, never having gone to Africa. So, you know, the power of the imagination is profound, but I don't know, maybe I need an excuse to revisit Northern California. Maybe I need
an excuse to go back to Paris. I mean, just to see if you got it right.
Yeah.
So you mentioned going to this cabin, okay? And I'm picturing in the book that cabin. Is that part of how you created that?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm thinking, you know, as you're talking, like I'm feeling the creepiness of that part in your book where like, oh my God. And I'm thinking you're alone in this. Are you feeling that kind of fear as you're gathering research?
100%. Yes, absolutely. And I haven't written exactly that way before, but in this moment, because I've never written a book like this before, I've never written suspense. Like I've never written this kind of story before. When I got to the penultimate moment where this, you know, where the protagonist meets the antagonist and it's a life or death situation, it helped that I had been in the physical space so that I could conjure that. It was almost like a creative writing exercise where I put myself in the body of my character and I let her feel her way through that situation, literally, like moment by moment, like what she was reaching for and what the light was like and what her actual experience was, because I had been in that literal room.
You know, as you're describing it, it really felt so real in the book. And I'm glad to see that you actually kind of live that. Like you're in the place and your imagination's creating all that. And the fact that you never wrote suspense before, I'm blown away because you did it so well. I mean, I was in bed reading this at 2:30 in the morning. I couldn't put it down, but I was really feeling a little scared too. I'm like, will I have nightmares? I'm like, okay, I have a dog and a husband here, but it was just at that edge of like, is it going to be too much? But it never quite was, but it took you right to that edge.
Thank you. Thank you. And it kind of like writing it also took me kind of right to that edge, but not over that edge. And I think it's because I believed the whole time that I was writing it, that I wasn't just doing it like for me, like to tell this specific story, but to represent a certain strata of human experience that maybe doesn't often get a voice. Sorry.
So do you see this turning into a film or a TV series? I mean, this is there's some good rich material in this book.
Oh, thank you. I mean, that's like the question we get now. It used to be like, is Oprah going to call you on her book club? And I'm like, I'm waiting every day.
Come on, Oprah, get on it.
Yeah, no, it has been optioned for for a series, and that would be absolutely amazing. I was so invested. I don't even need to tell you, Regina. I was so invested in this story and all of the characters, and not just Anna, right? Who is very close to my psyche, but all the tertiary characters. Yeah. Right? Like
even the dog. The dog's a great character.
The dog.
Cricket. I love Cricket.
Or the psychic, or the bartender.
Right. Right.
I literally believed that I could walk out of my imagination and into a bar and I would meet her. That's what we have to believe as readers, right? That's the power of imagination.
So question somebody has, how did you choose the title? Did you choose it? Did your publisher? How was it chosen? Because I know as a writer, sometimes you have a great title and they pick
I
someone.
hope my publisher is not watching it this particular moment, because sometimes it's a little bit of a shit show. I'm just saying. It's like my next topic.
Yep.
For me, if I write a book and I have a title in mind that feels very organic, feels like it's totally part of it, that's perfect, but almost never happens that way.
Yeah.
It's almost always like a joint effort at the end, like right before the book is in production, where 20 different people are weighing in on the title. And then the publisher is saying, oh my God, if that's the title, I'm never speaking to you again. And this particular title is one that I pitched out among maybe 20 different others. And I really liked it. So there's this moment when Anna, as a child, and she's a foster child at this moment, and her foster father, Hap, who is a forest ranger, are discussing how the stars, and it's a simple idea, it's not like a big idea, are always there, right? Even when we can't see them. And I thought that's really emblematic of something that's deeply seated in the book, right? This idea that things are there even when we think they're not, and that we are anchored to just the human experience of the universe and the world in ways that maybe we don't know we are, and that maybe we don't know that we're not alone. Right?
Well, I want to get to a little bit about you went from writing about badass women, Hadley Richardson, Beryl Markham, Martha Gellhorn, to creating kind of a badass fictional character. And you have this one quote that it's probably my favorite in the whole book. The world needs an army of Wandas, strong, sarcastic, unafraid women who say what they think and act straightforwardly, without apology or permission. Women who roar instead of flinch. Oh, women who roar. Like, I want to be a woman who roars. How did you come up with those words? Like, where did that come from? Wow.
Because that's what I want. Like, that's what I think we need. Like, yes, I've written about history's badass women. And then when I turn my hand to fiction, it's really no mistake that I create this kind of badass woman, because that's who I want to be. Like, this is my hero. Like, this is, and I'd like to think that I would do some of the things my characters do, right? Martha Gellhorn walking across the border from France into Spain on foot in the middle of the night, like during the Spanish Civil War. Like, I don't know that I'm that person, but I want to be that person.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I want to be that person. And I don't know, we raise the bar and then we try to reach it.
Well, it reminds me of that quote, well-behaved women seldom make history.
Yes, exactly.
It's like, it's the women who speak up and probably aren't liked, but man, do we need their voice. So I love that idea of roaring instead of flinching. That was just beautiful.
Thank you. So Wanda is the bartender that I was talking about earlier, for those of you who haven't read the book. And she's one of my favorite characters. And it's really interesting, isn't it? I mean, like, when you build a novel, it's really surprising how the characters who stick with you aren't necessarily always the main characters, but these tertiary characters get into your heart.
So who's your favorite character in this book?
My favorite character is Hap, who is Anna's foster father, and she goes to Mendocino when she's 10 years old after she's lost far too much. And she meets this guy who is a forest ranger who is also an expert on survival, as she is, although she is an expert on survival for unfortunate reasons. And he teaches her about the natural world, and he teaches her to be competent in the natural world in a way that changes the rest of her life. And in fact, it changes the course of the events of the rest of her life. It sort of like matriculates through the rest of the novel. I don't know. It really struck me, honestly, Regina, like often I'm asked when I do events for foster care, like from being someone who's come out of that system, like, did I have parents who changed my outcome? And often I have to say, unfortunately, I did not. But I created a character, like the character, like the parent I wish I had had. The person who would accept me for exactly who I was and like me for who I was, like as a kid, and who would do no harm, but kind of foster me through the world so I could become myself.
And you have a quote in the book: your biological parents give you their genes, the map of your physical self, but whoever raises you makes you who you are, for better or for worse. Family dynamics are acted out, not built in, though someday scientists might prove otherwise. So who had the most impact on kind of making you, right, like who you are today?
It was like a million different people. So I had probably 7 different mothers over the course of my childhood. But probably the person who had the greatest influence on me was when I was 9 years old. I moved to a foster home, and the girl across the street who became my best friend was her mother. That became kind of my, what I call my spiritual mother, like the mother that the universe meant to give me on the sly. And it's the woman who Circling the Sun is dedicated to.
Wow. That's
Who's
beautiful.
like, yeah, who was like literally the first adult who liked me for myself and
Wow.
trusted me. Yeah. Those relationships can be profound, and who honestly, like Hap, did no harm. You know,
Yeah.
didn't want anything from me. She was just there.
I'm glad you had her.
Yeah, me too. She's like 83 now, and still in my life. So I'm glad I have her.
Let me read you one more quote and then we'll get to some of these questions. You wrote, some people feel out of place when they're young, not because anything is wrong with them, but because there's something special that sets them apart. I thought that was so beautiful. Something they haven't figured out yet. And I wondered, did you have that something? Did you feel that?
I'll bet you did too. I love that little smile of yours. Yeah, but I think it was mostly something I hadn't figured out for most of my life. It certainly didn't feel like something that was special. For most of my life, it felt like a liability, or it felt like an obstacle, or it felt like an improbability, right? That I would somehow succeed in a life that seemed to be stacked against me. And yet we can be surprised. And this isn't an, I don't know. I think this is a difficult idea to say, that every once in a while, if we pivot our perception and say that sometimes maybe our most difficult experiences can create the person we're meant to be. Not that it's meant to be, right? Because people who endure horrible suffering, we can't tell those people that was meant to be. And yet, sometimes when I look back at my early experiences, I can see how they created the person I am today. And that all of that, I would say yes to. If the dice were being thrown today, I would say yes to that.
Beautiful. That's a beautiful way to describe it. Let me ask a couple questions that people have put in the chat room. One is, what genre will your next book reflect since you've explored historical fiction, memoir, and suspense?
Isn't that a great question?
It is, and people always ask, what's next as soon as your book comes out?
I don't know. I'm not sure. I can tell you I'm working on something.
Of course.
I'm in a good place with it. I'm happy to be working. I don't know. The thing about this book, honestly, Regina, that was so enlivening was that the idea came out of nowhere. It was so unlike anything I had ever done before. And it gave me incredible creative freedom to just follow this character, again, that came out of nowhere, and follow her character and follow her story. And that level of freedom is what I want in my creative life. Just whatever that idea is, that's what I want to follow, because
That's
that
beautiful.
is like pure creative integrity, right?
Beautiful. Well, Meg wrote, your novel is haunting and wonderful. You describe the way writers don't always know exactly what they're doing as they begin. How is that related to the process the reader goes through?
Oh,
I thought that's a fascinating question.
We're readers too, aren't we, Regina?
We better be, right?
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, you say yes, right? You say yes to the unknown. And that's exactly the process that you do when you're a writer. You say yes to the unknown. You say yes to uncertainty. You say yes to the subconscious. You say yes to the story that hasn't been written yet. And all the fears and all of the, I don't know, you just surrender. That's the best part. Isn't that the best part? And in fact, that's the part, I don't know about you. Like if I'm still reading at like 11 o'clock at night, because still have teenagers at home and my alarm's at 6:15. If I am still reading at 11 o'clock, you know you have got me.
Right.
Right? Like you have over the parapets, like over the bridges, like over every obstacle, like you have got me. And that is what I read for, is that particular moment.
That's beautiful. So what was it like to work on this during the pandemic? Did it change how you wrote or where you wrote?
It definitely changed both. Luckily, I was pretty deep into the writing during the pandemic because my kids came home during spring break of 2020, and they didn't go home again, right? I mean, they didn't go back to school again. They didn't leave home again. And so this precious thing that I created, which was space and quiet and time, didn't exist anymore. Like they were just home. And so I had to get much, much less fickle about how it was that I would make art. And this is something I think about a lot. Like we would like things to be a certain way, and yet they are a different way. And so what are we going to do now that they are that other way? And so sometimes I close my door. Sometimes I play music. Sometimes I play the white noise machine when they're in the other room. I think I've gotten less precious about that time. And yet, I don't know, I'm also really glad when they go to school and leave me alone too. I don't know. How about you? How did your work life change during the pandemic?
You know, we quarantined with my daughter and her kids. They live near us, and they're in Shaker Heights, we're in Cleveland Heights. And so we saw them, how my life changed. We got a puppy. I've never owned a dog in my life, but I got to tell you, I learned to love
your dog. It's
Oh my
a
God.
lovely animal.
This golden doodle that looks like a stuffed animal. And I just fell in love with a dog, which I never knew that I was capable of, but it brought out a different part of me. The writing, you know, I was able to say no easy because you couldn't go out anyway. So it was nice to turn down things. In the past, I would say a lot of yeses out of guilt. And then it was like, nope, there's a pandemic. So I had a lot more time to write. So it worked for me. But I wonder your writing routine, like, do you have a certain pattern of how you write every day, or what's your?
Yeah, I would love to hear yours too. And I'm sure other people would love to hear about yours. Yeah, like I have, Hemingway, who is a friend of mine, who is an intimate friend of mine from history, used to keep track of his word count every day. So at a certain point, when I started writing, I started keeping count of my word count every day in a little notebook. And it helps me feel like I am tied to an endeavor that has a certain level of integrity.
Mhm.
Like I've made a promise to these pages. I've made a promise to these words. And that helps me. It helps me work. And so yeah, I try to write 1,000 words a day. On a good day, I do that. And yeah, I just put my ass in the chair and hope that happens. And then I write it down on a little piece of paper, and I keep the pieces of paper and I put them in a box, a manuscript box with all the pages of what I've written. And it seems sacred in a way.
So you do it every day or just weekdays?
Every day I can.
Wow, that's commitment.
It's commitment, but it feels like devotion. It
Oh, I
feels
like that. Devotion sounds much better than commitment.
love. It's not, certainly I have this proletariat working class, go to the desk, and I say often to young writers, just touch it every day.
Oh,
Like open your file and touch it every day. Like have a conversation with this and see what happens. But yeah, it's devotional. It feels ritualistic. I light a candle, you know?
wow. I'm taking notes. This is so beautiful. No, because I hear a lot of people say, it takes discipline. Well, having been abused as a child in the name of discipline, that word I don't want anything to do with, I hate to say, but devotional sounds beautiful.
The ruler doesn't work for me
No.
either. But
Yeah.
that's softer, like this is where I bring my softest, highest self.
Oh,
Yeah.
I love that. See, right now I want somebody else to ask questions so I can take more notes. I love that, your softest, highest self. Wow. So I know it's really something, because I think a lot of people want to be writers, but to call it discipline, it feels harsh. And so they don't do it. And when you call it devotional, wow, that sounds like something I want,
Yeah, we all want devotion, right? It's
Yeah,
love. We want love and not fear.
Yes, yes. I like that. Yeah, love, for the love of it. So do you have any kind of a muse or any people talk about, well, I don't really feel inspired, but like I've been a journalist since 1986. So it doesn't matter if you feel inspired or not, you have a deadline. So I don't ever have writer's block because I had a deadline 3 days a week.
Right.
But I wonder for you, like, do you write no matter how you feel, whether the muse shows up or not?
No matter how I feel, same. I totally agree with that, because whatever inspiration is, it's mercurial and it's magical, and we do not have any control over it. But days come and I'm here. So instead of going to the mall and going shoe shopping, I'm going to sit down at the desk and I am going to light my candle. I'm going to light my candle. I'm going to say, I'm showing up today.
That's beautiful.
Right? I'm going to write my words, and whether or not they change the fate of fiction,
Yeah.
they are evidence that I was here. And
Oh, beautiful.
yeah, thank you. Hi.
Hi.
Hey.
That means our time is almost up here.
Passage. Thank you so much for hosting us. And Book Passage, you have literally been in my corner for just a bajillion years now. So thank you.
Oh, we love you here.
Yeah, I do want to thank our hosts, Book Passage in partnership with Warwick's in San Diego, Diesel Bookstore in Los Angeles, Logan Berry Books here in Cleveland, Joseph Beth Booksellers in Cincinnati, Politics and Prose in DC, Wellesley Books in Massachusetts, and Print, a bookstore in Portland, Maine. And the best way to thank our hosts is by buying books from them. So I'm going to pass it off to you. And thank you, Paula, so much for allowing me to be here.
Thank you guys so much, Regina and Paula. This was wonderful. Thank you to all the participating bookstores. And yes, please thank us. Support your independent bookstores. Support Book Passage if you live in the Bay Area. Even if you don't, you can order books online. You can call us. You can come into our store. We're open here in Corte Madera as well as the Ferry Building. And we want to just wish Paula and Regina luck on their next endeavors. And thank you so much to everybody for joining us and continuing to support us as well as your local bookstore. Have a wonderful, safe rest of your week, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Good night. Thank you.
Great job. Thanks so much.